The wedding reception had thinned to whispers and clinking glasses. Chairs sat askew, the buffet was nearly stripped bare, and the DJ was packing up his gear. Only a few stragglers lingered near the bar, nursing the last of the champagne. That's when I saw her standing alone, beneath the fairy lights strung across the garden, her heels dangling from one hand, her dress catching the glow like it had stolen the light for itself. I didn't plan to speak to her, but she smiled as if she'd been waiting. The music faded to a slow, almost sleepy melody, and without a word, I offered my hand. We danced there, two strangers orbiting each other in the cooling night, the scent of lilacs and wine drifting between us. Her gaze held mine just a beat longer than comfort allowed. "I don't usually dance with trouble," she murmured, her breath brushing my cheek. "But here we are." It should have been a throwaway line, charming, even forgettable. But something in her tone lingered, like the echo of a secret. As we turned, my eyes caught movement at the far edge of the garden. A man, barely lit by the dim bulbs, stood perfectly still in the shadows, watching. And just like that, the song didn't feel so slow anymore. The balcony outside the hotel suite was barely wide enough for two chairs, but we sat pressed shoulder to shoulder, the city humming far below. Between us, an open champagne bottle we'd liberated from the receptionist's gold foil torn and curling. Condensation dripping down the glass, she tilted the bottle toward me. "To gate-crashing life's better moments," she said, and the grin that followed felt like an invitation to something I didn't yet understand. We traded stories under the spill of moonlight, skipping between childhood memories and absurd dreams. Her laugh was unguarded, rich with something trust, but it faltered whenever I drifted too close to certain topics. "What do you do?" I asked. She glanced toward the street before answering. "A little of everything." Then, almost playfully, she turned the question back to me. I caught the way her fingers tapped against the stem of her glass. Quick, restless. Later, she admitted she hadn't been to a wedding in years. Her eyes softened as she said it, like the words carried a weight she couldn't or wouldn't set down. For a moment, I thought she might tell me why, but instead, she reached for the champagne, and the moment passed like steam on glass. I leaned back in my chair, watching her silhouette framed by the soft halo of balcony light. Across the street, a black SUV sat idling, engine low and steady. The driver's face was invisible behind tinted glass. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she just pretended not to. The night had been all soft edges and slow breaths, until the bang shattered it. It was sharp, metallic, too heavy to be a champagne cork. Somewhere in the courtyard, glass broke. The handful of lingering guests jolted, glancing at one another before hurrying back inside, voices overlapping in confused murmurs. Before I could move, her hand found mine warm, urgent. "Come on." We slipped down a narrow service hallway, the carpet muffling our steps. The music from the reception faded, replaced by the muffled thump of my own heartbeat. Halfway to the back exit, a man stumbled into view. His tux jacket was crooked, shirt blooming with a dark stain at the shoulder. The copper scent hit before I fully saw the blood. His eyes locked on hers. No words of greeting, just a flash drive pressed into her palm. His hand trembling. "Don't," he started, then grimaced, the rest swallowed in a pained breath. She didn't flinch. Her fingers curled over the drive as if she'd been expecting it. In one smooth motion, she slipped it into the lining of her clutch. Then, her gaze snapped to me, sharp and steady. "You didn't see this?" It wasn't a request. It was an instruction one I found myself nodding to without meaning to. The man staggered away, back toward the commotion. She waited a beat, listening for footsteps, her body still and coiled like a runner before the starting gun. Then she turned back to me with that same faint smile I'd seen on the dance floor, as if nothing had happened, only now, there was something behind it, something I couldn't name yet, but would learn to fear. The elevator doors closed with a metallic sigh, sealing us in a box of shadow and humming machinery. My hands wouldn't stay still, kept flexing. Restless while, she stood beside me, as if this were nothing more than an awkward ride between floors. "You're shaking," she said softly, not accusing, not concerned, just stating a fact. I tried to answer, but my mind kept replaying the image of that man, the blood blooming on his shirt. "Who was he?" I finally asked. Her gaze stayed fixed on the panel of buttons. "I used to know him, that was all. No name, no story, no why. Just enough to raise more questions than it settled." The elevator lurched to a stop between floors. Somewhere far above, muffled voices shouted orders. Through the thin metal walls, I could make out the unmistakable crackle of police radios. She tilted her head, listening, then pressed the door open button. This way, we slipped out into a dim maintenance corridor that smelled faintly of bleach and damp concrete. Her heels clicked softly on the tile, each step measured. Mine scuffed along behind, unsteady. A red exit sign glowed faintly at the far end. She pushed the door open, letting in the cool rush of night air. Across the street, police cars idled, lights flashing in silent rhythm. Officers moved in pairs, scanning the venue's perimeter. She glanced back at me, eyes catching a glint of that flashing blue. "Stay close, don't look at them." We threaded through a narrow alley, the sounds of the wedding now just an echo. At the far end, she stopped, turning to face me under the pale light of a flickering street lamp. "If they ask," she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "We never danced." It sounded almost playful, almost a secret between lovers. But there was a weight in it, something cold and deliberate, that made me realize this wasn't just about avoiding questions. It was about erasing a moment we both knew had already changed everything. And I wasn't sure yet if I could. The road unspooled in front of us, slick with the night's damp. She sat angled toward the window, hair brushing her cheek in the wind from the cracked glass. "Left here," she murmured. Then, a beat later, "No, take the next right." It wasn't a route. It was a maze. I tried to focus on the turns, but my eyes kept flicking to the faint glow in her lap. A second phone, one I hadn't seen before, cupped in her hands like a secret. On the screen, lines of folders blinked open, file names flashing past faster than I could read them. "What's on it?" I asked, my voice more brittle than I meant. She didn't look up. "Nothing you need to carry." The dashboard clock read 12:47, when the sweep of headlights revealed a police checkpoint ahead, two cruisers angled to funnel traffic into a single lane. The flash of red and blue lit her face for a heartbeat, and in that instant, her calm broke just enough for me to see the calculation in her eyes. "Let me handle this," she whispered. The officer leaned into my window, flashlight grazing over my hands on the wheel. "License and registration." Before I could reach for my wallet, her hand cupped the back of my neck, and she kissed me slow, deliberate, as though the world outside the car didn't exist. My pulse roared in my ears. The beam of light hesitated, then moved on. "All right, move along," the officer said, stepping back. We passed through without another word. 15 minutes later, the town had thinned into cracked asphalt and boarded storefronts. She pointed to a flickering neon vacancy sign. "Pull in here." The motel's paint peeled in long curls. A vending machine hummed under the stairwell. She slid out of the car, already moving toward the office. When she returned with a single key, she pressed it into my palm. "We'll lay low here tonight." Her voice made it sound like we were just catching our breath. But something in the way she scanned the shadows told me this was less about rest and more about disappearing. The motel room smelled faintly of dust and old air freshener. A single lamp threw a weak amber glow across the faded floral curtains. I locked the door, and for the first time all night, it felt like we'd stopped moving. She sat on the edge of the bed, kicked off her shoes, and reached for my phone. "You have music?" I nodded, scrolling until I found something slow, something that felt like it belonged to a softer world. The first notes filled the room, muffled by the thin walls. She stepped toward me, her eyes searching mine with a half-smile that seemed to carry both relief and something sharper. "Dance with me," she said. I hesitated, then slid a hand to her waist. She leaned in close enough that I could feel her breath against my cheek. We swayed in the cramped space between the bed and the dresser, the kind of slow dance that makes time feel heavier. Her voice was quiet, but the words landed with weight. "Would you trust me if it meant breaking the law?" I laughed softly, though my chest tightened. "That's a strange hypothetical." "It's not hypothetical," she said, her eyes never leaving mine. I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure what the truth was. Her head rested briefly against my shoulder, and I thought, maybe I already do. Then, from the corner of my eye, something caught my attention through the thin slit in the curtain, a familiar shape parked under the flickering streetlight. Black SUV, same one from the wedding. The engine idled, exhaust curling in the cold night air. "Someone's out there," said, pulling back. She didn't turn to look. Instead, She pressed closer for just a moment more, as if finishing the song was more important than whatever waited outside. When the final note faded, she stepped away, her expression unreadable. "You should get some sleep," she murmured, moving toward her bag. I didn't notice the slight brush of her hand against my jacket pocket, the subtle shift of weight in the fabric. Later, after she disappeared into the bathroom, I would remember the way her gaze lingered on me before she closed the door, the way she seemed to be saying goodbye without the words, and the way my heart didn't know whether to call it love or the setup I should have seen coming. The knock wasn't a knock, it was a thunderclap. The motel door burst inward, splintering at the frame, and the room filled with the blunt chaos of shouting voices and glinting badges, hands where I can see them. I froze, palms up, eyes darting to her. Arya's face was a mask of shock, or something close enough to pass for it. 2 officers wrenched me to my feet, one pinning my arms, while the other reached into my jacket. When his hand came back out, it was holding the flash drive, the one she'd sworn she'd keep safe. The one I hadn't even known she'd slipped into my pocket. The room seemed to tilt. "That's not my voice broke. It's not mine." She turned toward me, her lips parted like she was about to defend me. But no words came. "Sir, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice," the lead officer said, his tone flat. The cuffs bit into my wrists. As they dragged me toward the door, I caught sight of her stepping closer to one of the detectives. She leaned in just enough to whisper something I couldn't hear. His jaw tightened. When she turned back, her eyes locked on mine. Her lips moved slowly, deliberately. "I'm sorry. I wanted to believe it. I still do." The hallway blurred as they pulled me out, my shoulder clipping the doorframe. Somewhere down the corridor, faint through the ringing in my ears, music was playing from another room, a slow, aching tune. It was the same song from the wedding, the last song we'd ever danced to. "The cell is cold," the kind that seeps into your bones no matter how you sit. I keep my hands clasped in my lap, like I'm still holding hers, feeling the phantom warmth that refuses to fade. Somewhere in the distance, a door slams, and I hear Detective Casas's voice from hours earlier, his words heavy enough to anchor in my skull. "Some people steal hearts. Others just use them as cover. They say the mind plays tricks when you're boxed in. But the memories are clear: her perfume, the press of her palm, the sway of her body under the fairy lights." I close my eyes, and I'm back there. The wedding almost empty, the music fading, the world reduced to the 2 of us moving slow, as if we had forever. She looked at me like I was the only safe place she'd ever known. Maybe that was the lie. If I could go back, I'd still take her hand, because some traps are worth falling into, if only for one more dance.